In a quiet village surrounded by lush green hills and thick forests, there lived a young man named Kai. He wasn't born into wealth or privilege. His family had always been simple farmers, but life hadn't been kind to him. When he was just a child, both of his parents passed away in an accident, leaving him in the care of his grandmother. Despite the hardships, Kai grew up with a fire inside him, a determination to rise above his circumstances. Kai's grandmother ran a small dojo that had been in their family for generations. It wasn't fancy, nor did it attract many students, but it held decades of wisdom passed down through their ancestors. From a young age, Kai spent hours practicing martial arts under his grandmother's watchful eye. She taught him basic techniques, emphasizing discipline, patience, and respect. Over time, Kai began experimenting with his own moves, blending what he learned from his grandmother with his natural agility and creativity. His style wasn't textbook perfect. It was raw, unpredictable, and uniquely his own. The villagers often gathered to watch Kai train. They admired his dedication and skill, even if they didn't fully understand his unorthodox methods. Some called him reckless, while others saw potential in his unconventional approach. Regardless of the opinions, Kai kept pushing himself harder each day. He dreamed of testing his skills against stronger opponents, hoping one day to prove that talent wasn't limited to those who attended prestigious academies. Life in the village was peaceful but predictable. Every morning, Kai would help his grandmother tend to the crops before heading to the dojo. In the evenings, he'd sit by the fireplace, listening to her stories about legendary warriors who fought not for fame but for justice. These tales fueled Kai's imagination, planting seeds of ambition deep within him. He wanted more than the quiet life of a villager. He craved adventure, challenges, and the chance to make a difference. One fateful afternoon, as Kai practiced his forms near the village square, a traveler arrived on horseback. The man carried news of a grand tournament being held at the royal capital. The event aimed to recruit skilled fighters to join the king's royal guard. For most villagers, this announcement was nothing more than gossip over tea. But for Kai, it felt like destiny knocking at his door. That night, Kai couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining himself standing in the arena, facing off against elite warriors. Doubts crept in. What if he wasn't good enough? What if his self-taught techniques failed him? But then he remembered something his grandmother once said. True strength comes not from where you learn, but from how hard you're willing to fight. With renewed resolve, Kai decided to enter the tournament. Preparing for the journey wasn't easy. The trip to the capital required money they didn't have, so Kai sold some old farming tools and saved every coin he could. His grandmother sewed a sturdy travel cloak for him, reminding him to stay humble no matter what happened. As he packed his belongings, Kai felt a mix of excitement and fear. This was his chance to step out of the shadows and into the world beyond the hills. On the morning of his departure, the entire village came to see him off. Children waved sticks like swords, pretending to be martial artists like Kai. Elderly neighbors patted him on the back, offering words of encouragement. Even the grumpy baker, who usually scolded Kai for sneaking extra bread, handed him a loaf for the road. As Kai looked around at the faces of the people he loved, he promised himself he wouldn't let them down. With his heart pounding and his bag slung over his shoulder, Kai set off toward the unknown. Little did he know, this decision would lead him far beyond the tournament. It would take him to places he never imagined, introduce him to friends and enemies alike, and challenge everything he thought he knew about strength, loyalty, and honor. Kai's victory over Captain Elias in the semifinals had turned him into an overnight sensation. News of the village boy who had swept the legs of one of the kingdom's most respected warriors spread like wildfire. By the time he returned to his makeshift quarters, a small tent provided for competitors near the arena. People were already lining up to congratulate him. Some offered pats on the back, while others simply stared in awe, whispering about how remarkable his journey had been so far. But Kai didn't have much time to bask in his newfound fame. The next morning, A royal messenger arrived at his tent with an invitation that left him speechless. King Aldrich himself wanted to meet Kai. At first, Kai thought it was a mistake. Surely, the king had better things to do than speak to someone like him, a nobody from a tiny village. But as the messenger explained, this wasn't just any meeting. It was an honor reserved only for those who showed exceptional skill and character during the tournament. Dressed in the cleanest clothes he could find, Kai followed the messenger through the palace gates, feeling both excited and terrified. The grandeur of the royal court took his breath away. Golden chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and intricate tapestries depicting battles and legends adorned the walls. Servants moved quietly across marble floors, their footsteps barely audible. Every detail screamed wealth and power, making Kai feel even smaller than before. When he finally stood before King Aldrich, Kai bowed deeply, unsure of what to say or do. The king, however, was warm and approachable. With kind eyes and a steady voice, he praised Kai for his performance in the tournament. "You fight not just with strength but with heart," the king said, his words echoing softly in the throne room. It is rare to see such humility combined with such talent. To Kai's astonishment, the king then extended an invitation. If Kai won the final match, he would be granted a place among the royal guard, an offer typically reserved for nobles or graduates of elite academies. Kai struggled to find the right words to express his gratitude. All he could manage was a heartfelt "Thank you, Your Majesty." The king smiled, clearly pleased with Kai's modesty, and dismissed him with a nod. News of the king's favor spread quickly, and by the time Kai returned to the arena, the atmosphere around him had shifted. Some competitors and guards now greeted him warmly, impressed by his rise from obscurity. Others, however, weren't as welcoming. Among them was Lieutenant Marlowe, a tall, sharp-featured officer known for his cunning and ambition. Marlowe watched Kai from afar, his expression unreadable but undeniably cold. During the induction ceremony held later that evening, Kai officially became a provisional member of the Royal Guard. Clad in the crimson cloak symbolizing his new role, he felt a mix of pride and unease. As he stood alongside seasoned warriors, whispers filled the air. Some admired his determination, calling him an inspiration. Others scoffed, questioning whether someone without noble blood or formal training truly belonged among them. Lieutenant Marlowe made no secret of his disdain. During a brief exchange, he sneered at Kai, saying, "The king may see promise in you, but we'll see how long you last." His tone was dripping with mockery, leaving Kai unsettled. Though Kai tried to brush it off, he couldn't shake the feeling that Marlowe's hostility ran deeper than mere jealousy. That night, as Kai lay awake in his quarters, he replayed the day's events in his mind. He knew earning the king's trust was only the beginning. The real challenge would be proving himself to the very people he now served alongside. And as he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't help but wonder, was Marlowe's animosity just personal rivalry, or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? Whatever it was, Kai vowed to stay vigilant. After all, surviving in the Royal Guard might be even harder than winning the tournament. Kai's journey back to the capital was a blur of pain and determination. The wounds he had sustained during his escape from the fortress throbbed with every step, but he pushed through the agony, knowing that time was not on his side. The documents hidden in his cloak felt heavier than they actually were, a constant reminder of the stakes. If he failed, the conspiracy would succeed, and the kingdom he had sworn to protect would fall into chaos. As he approached the palace gates, Kai knew he couldn't simply walk in, not as a fugitive. Instead, he sought out Sergeant Rhea, who had been keeping watch for his return. She greeted him with a mixture of relief and concern, her eyes widening at the sight of his battered body. "You're alive," she whispered, helping him into a secluded chamber where he could rest briefly. Kai handed her the documents, his hands trembling. "This is it," he said hoarsely. "The proof we need." Rhea studied the papers carefully, her expression growing darker with each line she read. The conspiracy went deeper than either of them had imagined, implicating not only Marlowe but also several high-ranking officials within the royal court. Worse still, the assassins were already en route to the palace, planning to strike that very night. There was no time to waste. Together, Kai and Rhea devised a plan. They alerted a small group of loyal guards, those who had always doubted the accusations against Kai, and prepared to defend the king at all costs. Though outnumbered, their resolve burned brighter than ever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the palace grounds, Kai armed himself with nothing more than his staff and the unshakable belief that justice would prevail. The attack came swiftly. Masked figures scaled the walls, their movements silent but deadly. Alarms blared as the first wave breached the gates, clashing with the royal guard in chaotic skirmishes. Kai fought alongside his comrades, his agility and precision turning the tide in several key moments. He moved like a shadow, striking down enemies before they even realized he was there. Yet for every foe he defeated, another seemed to take their place. At the heart of the battle lay the throne room, where King Aldrich stood surrounded by a shrinking circle of defenders. The assassins converged on him, their blades glinting cruelly in the torchlight. Kai pushed forward, fighting his way through the chaos with single-minded focus. When he finally reached the throne room, he found Lieutenant Marlowe leading the charge, a final act of betrayal. "Stop this!" Kai shouted, stepping between Marlowe and the king. His voice echoed through the chamber, cutting through the din of battle. Marlowe sneered, raising his sword. "You've lost, peasant. No one will believe you over me." But Kai didn't falter. Drawing on every ounce of strength he had left, he engaged Marlowe in a brutal duel. Each strike was fueled by desperation and anger, the weight of everything he had endured driving him forward. Finally, with a swift sweep of his staff, Kai disarmed Marlowe, sending the lieutenant crashing to the floor. Defeated and broken, Marlowe stared up at him, his arrogance replaced by fear. With the immediate threat neutralized, Kai turned to the king, presenting the incriminating documents. Exhausted but resolute, he explained the full scope of the conspiracy. King Aldrich listened intently, his expression grave but grateful. "You have saved us all," he said, placing a hand on Kai's shoulder. "Your courage will not be forgotten." But victory came at a cost. As the dust settled, Kai collapsed to his knees, blood seeping through his bandages. His vision blurred, and darkness closed in. Before losing consciousness, he heard Rhea's voice calling his name, urging him to hold on. In that moment, Kai smiled faintly, knowing he had fulfilled his duty. Whatever happened next, he had proven that true strength wasn't about titles or wealth. It was about standing firm when it mattered most. The tournament began with a flurry of energy and anticipation. The arena, a massive circular space surrounded by towering stone walls, buzzed with the sound of cheering crowds. Flags bearing the kingdom's emblem fluttered in the breeze, and the air smelled of roasted nuts and freshly baked bread from nearby vendors. Kai stood among the competitors, his heart pounding as he waited for his turn. Though he tried to appear calm, his hands trembled slightly, and his mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. In the early rounds, fighters were paired randomly, and Kai quickly realized that not all opponents were created equal. Some relied on brute strength, swinging heavy axes or maces with little regard for technique. Others moved with precision, their movements sharp and calculated. But Kai had something they didn't, an ability to adapt. He watched each opponent carefully, studying their habits and weaknesses before making his move. When it was his turn to step into the arena, he did so with quiet confidence. His first match was against a burly fighter named Goran, whose size alone seemed enough to intimidate most challengers. Goran charged at Kai like a bull, roaring loudly to unsettle him. But Kai remained calm. As Goran swung his massive club, Kai sidestepped gracefully, using his agility to stay just out of reach. The crowd gasped as Kai countered with a swift kick to Goran's knee, causing the larger man to stumble. With a final burst of speed, Kai delivered a spinning strike that sent Goran crashing to the ground. The audience erupted into cheers, and even Goran offered a nod of respect as he limped off the field. Kai advanced through the next few rounds with similar ease, relying on his quick reflexes and clever tactics. His unorthodox style puzzled many of his opponents, who struggled to predict his moves. Word of the village boy spread quickly, drawing more spectators to watch his matches. Some admired his skill, while others dismissed him as lucky. But Kai paid no attention to the whispers. He focused only on the fight in front of him. By the time the semifinals arrived, Kai had earned a reputation as a formidable contender. His opponent was none other than Captain Elias, the same royal guard who had caught Kai's eye during the opening ceremony. Unlike the other fighters, Elias exuded calm authority. His movements were deliberate, almost effortless, and his eyes never wavered from Kai's. It was clear that this would be Kai's toughest challenge yet. The match started evenly, with both fighters testing each other's defenses. Elias moved like water, flowing smoothly between attacks and counters. For the first time in the tournament, Kai found himself struggling to keep up. Every time he thought he saw an opening, Elias closed it with practiced efficiency. The crowd grew silent, holding their breath as the two warriors circled each other. Then an opportunity arose. Elias lunged forward, aiming for a powerful strike. But Kai was ready. Dropping low, he swept his leg across the ground, knocking Elias off balance. The crowd roared as the captain hit the dirt with a thud. For a moment, Kai froze, unable to believe what he had done. He had swept the legs of one of the kingdom's finest warriors, a feat few thought possible. Elias rose slowly, brushing dust from his armor. To Kai's surprise, the captain smiled and extended a hand. "Well fought," he said, his voice steady and sincere. Kai shook his hand, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. As the crowd cheered, he allowed himself a brief moment to savor the victory. But amidst the celebration, Kai failed to notice a shadowy figure watching him intently from the stands. This person's expression was unreadable, but their gaze lingered long after the match ended. Unbeknownst to Kai, his performance had drawn the attention of someone far more dangerous than any opponent in the arena. And this newfound recognition would soon set events in motion that he could never have anticipated. Kai's escape from custody was nothing short of daring. With the help of Sergeant Rhea, who risked her own reputation to free him, Kai slipped into the shadows of the capital under the cover of night. The weight of betrayal hung heavy on his shoulders. Marlowe's scheme had framed him for stealing classified documents, and now he was a fugitive in the very kingdom he had sworn to protect. But Kai refused to let anger cloud his judgment. He knew that clearing his name meant uncovering the truth behind the conspiracy, no matter how dangerous the path might be. Rhea had managed to gather fragments of information before Kai's arrest. A secret meeting was rumored to take place in an abandoned fortress outside the city, where high-ranking officials planned to finalize their plot against King Aldrich. If Kai could infiltrate the stronghold and retrieve evidence of their treachery, he could expose the traitors and restore his honor. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one they had. Under the guise of a traveling merchant, Kai made his way to the fortress. The journey was fraught with tension. Every passing guard or villager seemed suspicious, and Kai kept his head low, avoiding eye contact. When he finally reached the crumbling structure, its dark silhouette loomed against the moonlit sky like a beast waiting to pounce. The air smelled of damp stone and decay, and the faint glow of torchlight flickered through cracks in the walls. Slipping inside undetected required all of Kai's skill. He moved silently, using his agility to scale broken staircases and dart between shadows. Voices echoed from a chamber deep within the fortress, growing louder as he approached. Peering through a crack in the door, Kai saw what he had feared. A group of conspirators gathered around a table, poring over maps and scrolls. Among them was Lieutenant Marlowe, his face twisted with ambition as he outlined plans to overthrow the king. Kai's heart raced. He needed proof. A document, a seal, anything that would expose their scheme. Carefully he crept closer, staying hidden behind pillars and crates. Just as he spotted a stack of incriminating papers on the table, one of the guards turned abruptly, sensing movement. Kai froze, holding his breath until the man shrugged and returned to his post. Seizing the moment, Kai snatched the documents and tucked them into his cloak. But as he turned to leave, another guard spotted him. Alarms rang out, and chaos erupted. Armed men poured into the corridor, shouting orders and brandishing weapons. Kai fought back with everything he had, using his martial arts training to disarm and evade his attackers. His movements were fluid and precise, each strike calculated to create space and buy time. The battle led him to a narrow bridge overlooking the cavernous pit. Cornered and outnumbered, Kai faced Marlowe himself. The lieutenant sneered, drawing his sword. "You think you can stop us?" He spat. "You're just a peasant playing at being a hero." Kai didn't respond. Instead, he focused, channeling every ounce of discipline he'd ever learned. The duel was fierce, with Marlowe's polished technique clashing against Kai's raw adaptability. For a moment, it seemed as though Marlowe might prevail, but then Kai saw his opening. Dodging a powerful swing, he countered with a swift kick that sent Marlowe stumbling backward. The lieutenant fell to his knees, defeated but defiant. Breathing heavily, Kai demanded answers. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Marlowe laughed bitterly. "Power isn't given to people like you," he hissed. "It's taken, and once the king is gone, I'll rule this kingdom." With no time to waste, Kai left Marlowe behind and fled the fortress, clutching the stolen documents tightly. Though injured and exhausted, he knew his mission wasn't over yet. These papers were the key to saving the king and proving his innocence. As dawn broke over the horizon, Kai pushed forward, determined to deliver justice to those who sought to destroy it. The journey to the capital was long and grueling, but Kai's excitement outweighed his fatigue. As he walked along winding dirt paths, he marveled at the changing landscape. The rolling hills of his village gave way to vast plains dotted with wildflowers, and eventually, the towering spires of the royal city came into view. The closer he got, the more overwhelming the sights and sounds became. Merchants shouted from their carts, children ran through cobblestone streets, and armored guards stood tall at every corner, their polished armor gleaming under the sun. Kai couldn't help but feel out of place. Unlike the other travelers around him, who wore fine clothes or carried expensive weapons, Kai's appearance was modest. His cloak was patched in places, and his boots were worn from years of use. He carried no grand sword or shield, just a small pack containing basic supplies and a wooden staff he used for practice. Still, he held his head high, reminding himself that confidence was as important as any weapon. When he finally reached the registration area for the tournament, Kai was struck by the sheer number of competitors. Dozens of fighters from across the kingdom had gathered, each eager to prove themselves worthy of joining the royal guard. Most of them looked like seasoned warriors, their bodies sculpted by years of rigorous training. Some flaunted intricate tattoos marking their allegiance to famous academies, while others displayed trophies earned in previous battles. Kai felt like a fish out of water, but he refused to let doubt creep in. As he signed his name on the roster, a few nearby fighters snickered at his plain attire. One man, clad in shining plate armor, sneered and muttered something about village boys trying to play warrior. Kai ignored the comment, focusing instead on the task ahead. He reminded himself why he was here, to test his limits and show that skill mattered more than appearances. While waiting for the opening ceremony, Kai wandered through the bustling marketplace that surrounded the arena. Stalls overflowed with colorful fabrics, exotic fruits, and dazzling trinkets. Vendors called out to passers-by, offering everything from sharpened daggers to enchanted amulets. Kai stopped briefly at a stall selling maps of the city, realizing how vast and complex the capital truly was. It made his tiny village seem impossibly far away. Amid the chaos, Kai noticed a group of royal guards standing near the arena entrance. Their presence commanded respect, their crimson cloaks billowing slightly in the breeze. They moved with precision and purpose, their eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of trouble. One guard in particular caught Kai's attention, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp features and an air of authority. His name, Kai later learned, was Captain Elias, a celebrated veteran of the Royal Guard. Something about the captain's steady gaze made Kai feel both inspired and intimidated. That evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Kai found a quiet spot near the river to reflect. Sitting cross-legged on the grass, he watched boats drift lazily downstream, their lanterns casting golden reflections on the water. For the first time since leaving his village, he allowed himself to fully absorb the enormity of what he was about to do. Tomorrow, he would face opponents who had spent lifetimes preparing for this moment. Would his unique style be enough? Or would his lack of formal training leave him exposed? Just then, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Turning around, Kai saw a young girl holding a flower crown she had woven from wild blooms. "For luck," she said shyly, placing it on his head before running off. Her unexpected kindness brought a smile to his face, easing some of the tension in his chest. Maybe he didn't belong here yet, but perhaps that was okay. After all, every great journey started with a single step. With renewed determination, Kai stood up and stretched his arms toward the horizon. The capital might have been intimidating, but it also brimmed with opportunity. Somewhere in this sprawling city, his destiny awaited, and Kai was ready to seize it. When Kai awoke, the world around him was quiet, save for the soft rustle of curtains swaying in the breeze. He blinked against the sunlight streaming through tall windows and realized he wasn't in his modest tent or the cold stone chambers of the fortress. He was in a grand, luxurious room fit for royalty. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, and a plush blanket covered him, stitched with golden thread bearing the emblem of the kingdom. For a moment, he thought it might all be a dream. Sergeant Rhea sat by his bedside, her face lighting up when she saw him stir. "You're awake," she said, relief washing over her features. She explained that weeks had passed since the battle at the palace. Kai's injuries had been severe, but the royal healers worked tirelessly to mend his wounds. During that time, King Aldrich had acted swiftly, using the evidence Kai retrieved to dismantle the conspiracy. Marlowe and his co-conspirators were arrested, their treachery exposed before the entire court. The kingdom, once teetering on the edge of chaos, was now safe, and Kai's role in its salvation had become legend. The king visited Kai later that day, walking into the room with an air of quiet dignity. His piercing gaze softened as he looked at Kai, who struggled to sit upright. "Rest," the king commanded gently, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "You've earned it." He went on to explain how Kai's bravery had restored faith not only in the monarchy, but also in the people's belief that honor and justice still existed. To honor his sacrifice, King Aldrich reinstated Kai as a full member of the royal guard and bestowed upon him the title of Protector of the Realm. Kai protested weakly, insisting he didn't deserve such recognition. But the king silenced him with a raised hand. "Your actions speak louder than any words," he said firmly. "You risked everything, not for glory, but because it was right. That is true nobility." As news of Kai's heroism spread, attitudes toward him shifted dramatically. No longer seen as an outsider, he became a symbol of hope and resilience. Young recruits looked up to him, eager to learn from the man who had risen from humble beginnings to become one of the kingdom's greatest defenders. Even those who had doubted him initially came to respect his unwavering dedication to duty and fairness. In the months that followed, Kai resumed his role within the royal guard, though he approached it differently this time. Having faced betrayal and danger, he understood the importance of trust and unity among comrades. He took younger guards under his wing, teaching them not just combat skills, but also the values of humility, teamwork, and integrity. Under his guidance, they grew stronger, not just as fighters, but as individuals committed to protecting the innocent. Though his body bore scars from the battles he had fought, Kai carried himself with newfound confidence. He never sought fame or praise, yet people often stopped him in the streets to thank him or ask for advice. Children mimicked his fighting stances, pretending to sweep imaginary enemies off their feet. Elderly villagers told stories of his exploits, painting him as a modern-day legend. One evening, as Kai stood on the palace balcony overlooking the city, he reflected on how far he'd come. From a boy practicing forms in a quiet village dojo to a warrior defending an entire kingdom, his journey had been anything but ordinary. Yet what filled him with pride wasn't the titles or accolades. It was knowing he had stayed true to himself and his principles. Beside him, Sergeant Rhea joined him in silence, gazing out at the twinkling lights of the capital. "You did good, Kai," she said softly. He smiled, nodding. "We did good," he replied. Together, they watched the stars shimmer above the horizon, symbols of endless possibilities and untold futures. Kai's story became more than just a tale of triumph. It was a reminder that greatness wasn't defined by where you came from, but by the choices you made along the way. And as long as there were challenges to face and injustices to fight, Kai would stand ready, a protector of the realm and a beacon of hope for all who believed in doing what was right. Life as a royal guard was far more complicated than Kai had imagined. While his martial arts skills earned him respect in the arena, the day-to-day duties of a guard required much more than physical strength. The royal court was a labyrinth of politics, alliances, and hidden agendas, and Kai quickly realized that navigating this world would be just as challenging as any battle. His first assignment seemed simple enough: accompany Captain Elias on a routine patrol of the city markets. But even this task revealed how unprepared Kai was for the subtleties of his new role. When a merchant accused another of stealing goods, Kai instinctively stepped forward to intervene. However, instead of resolving the issue with force, Elias calmly mediated between the two parties, using diplomacy to diffuse the tension. Kai watched in awe, realizing that being the guard wasn't always about fighting. It was about maintaining peace and protecting people without resorting to violence. Despite these lessons, not everyone welcomed Kai into the ranks. Lieutenant Marlowe made it clear that he saw Kai as an outsider who didn't belong among the elite. At every opportunity, Marlowe assigned Kai the most grueling and thankless tasks: guarding remote outposts, patrolling dangerous alleys late at night, or cleaning equipment after long shifts. Some nights, Kai returned to the barracks exhausted, questioning whether he could endure such hostility. But adversity often reveals allies in unexpected places. Sergeant Rhea, a seasoned veteran known for her sharp wit and sharper blade, began watching out for Kai. She noticed his determination and offered guidance when others dismissed him. "Don't let them break you," she advised one evening as they shared a quiet meal in the mess hall. "Strength isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving despite the odds." Her words stuck with Kai, fueling his resolve to prove himself worthy of the crimson cloak he now wore. Kai also found support among some of the younger recruits who admired his unconventional style and humble demeanor. Unlike many senior guards, Kai didn't boast about his accomplishments or belittle those less experienced. Instead, he took time to teach them techniques he'd learned in his village dojo, emphasizing adaptability and creativity over rigid forms. These small acts of kindness earned him loyalty from the newer members of the guard, creating a network of friends within an otherwise hostile environment. Still, challenges mounted. One particularly brutal mission tested Kai's limits. Sent to investigate reports of bandits near the kingdom's border, Kai and his team were ambushed during their return journey. Outnumbered and caught off guard, panic threatened to take hold. But Kai remembered his training, his ability to think quickly and act decisively. Using the terrain to his advantage, he led his squad in a counterattack, dragging the bandits away. Though shaken, the group returned safely, and Kai's leadership during the skirmish silenced some of his critics. Yet no matter how hard Kai worked, Marlowe's animosity lingered like a shadow. Whispers followed Kai wherever he went, hinting at rumors planted by Marlowe to undermine his reputation. Some claimed Kai relied too heavily on luck rather than skill. Others suggested his promotion had been a mistake. Though hurt by the accusations, Kai refused to retaliate. He focused instead on doing his job with integrity, believing that actions spoke louder than words. As weeks turned into months, Kai slowly gained confidence in his abilities. He learned to balance diplomacy with combat, patience with assertiveness. His adaptability became an asset, earning him praise from Captain Elias and other fair-minded officers. Even so, Kai couldn't shake the feeling that something darker loomed on the horizon. Marlowe's constant scheming hinted at a larger plan, one that might put not only Kai's future but the entire kingdom at risk. Though weary from the trials he faced, Kai remained steadfast. Every challenge only strengthened his resolve to protect what mattered most. He reminded himself daily why he had joined the Royal Guard, not for glory or recognition, but because he believed in justice. And if staying true to that belief meant enduring hardships, then so be it. After all, the greatest battles weren't fought with fists. They were won with courage, perseverance, and an unyielding heart.